Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range technical forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, here's what you're going to get out of this video. We're going to talk first about the near-term frost threat in the eastern part of the United States. We're going to talk about how the pattern adjusts into next week and where it takes us as we progress through the end of the month of May and what that might mean for severe weather in the central United States and drought in the central United States. Then at the very end of this, I want to take the long-term look out to summer by getting a glance here at the latest European model runs for June, July, and August. So we're going to get there, all right? Starting things off, what we're going to be watching in the near term is three features. One will be this trough. Two will be that one, and third will be this one. Now, in the near term, the trough that's in the Gulf of Alaska is expected to deepen considerably, as the trough that just moved through the northwest is going to be racing through the central part of the United States. Replacing that will be a highly amplified ridge that comes back into this area, which means a major warm-up for the western United States. But as that ridge amplifies, it's definitely going to deepen this trough, which is what's going to send us over to the very, very cold weather. So let's talk about it. Let's get right on into temperature maps. This is the forecast minimum temperature for tomorrow. And I've added a new feature to these maps. There's going to be a white contour line that shows up on them. You're going to see it right here. If you kind of look, there's the start of it here in North Dakota. That white contour line represents where to the north of that, you're going to be seeing temperatures below freezing. So watch as we go from Thursday into Friday. Friday morning's lows, much of the central plain, well, the northern central plains getting into Minnesota, then Wisconsin, Michigan, then and parts of the interior of New England are going to be seeing below freezing temperatures. But our biggest concern, I think, for the broadest extent of a freeze event is going to be on Saturday. And here's what we're watching. There will be a low that's skirting right here through parts of Montana and then into parts of North Dakota. But out ahead of it, a large area of higher atmospheric pressure. Now with that high, you get clear skies and light winds. You can see that in the arrows. And this is valid 4 a.m. Saturday morning, which is about the time where we want everything to calm down so that we would get strong radiational cooling. Well, we don't want that, but that's what the atmosphere is going to do. And that will result in a broad sector of the mid part of the United States having its temperatures really plummet. And here's how things look. Now you can see where that white contour line is. North of that line, so this encompasses Minnesota, big chunk of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then parts of Kentucky, maybe some Tennessee, West Virginia, and then into the Northeast. That's a broad sector seeing a very late frost event. Some places like in Kentucky, the Ohio Valley, this is more than a month after the average last frost date. So this will be challenging some long-standing records here in this section of the United States. Now, as we transition from Saturday to Sunday, that cool weather moves to the east, and my concern then shifts here over into parts of North Carolina and Virginia. Now, certainly in the mountains here, it's not that uncommon to still be able to get a freezing temperature at high elevation, but into the interior of New England and seeing here into parts of the mid-Atlantic, this is a pretty rare event here, bringing in a potential for a frost very late. So we need to keep a close eye on this as we progress toward the weekend. The moderation begins after, the 10th and 11th, like we've been talking about. We still see below average temperatures across much of the eastern two-thirds of the country, with below freezing temperatures in the northern plains and Great Lakes states. But moderation starts after that. So this is now the 12th. We're going to talk about where we go after this in a few moments, but I want to turn your attention next over to precipitation. Because as that short wave sneaks out of Montana, you can see where we're anticipating rainfall and potentially some snow as we work our way through Friday afternoon. So this is the NAM model's outlook on precipitation through Friday midday. I am concerned about the threat of severe weather. We're going to talk about this in more detail tomorrow right in here as we work our way into the day on Thursday. So severe weather threat in the Red River Valley. But I think the broader sector here we need to be thinking about is very heavy rainfall potentially. Well, not heavy, but persistent rainfall over Illinois, a place that's seen a lot of it as of late. And maybe some nice rain that could come through here, but with those cold temperatures, this is not exactly what we would want to see. But we do need to get some rain in that area simply because of some of the drought concerns we have there. Now, what we really have to pay attention to is this. So as that system comes out here on Thursday morning, working into Thursday evening and now Friday, you saw there that on the back side of it as it gets over into the Ohio Valley, the chances of there being enough cold air here for possibly a brief changeover to some wet snowflakes is in the cards. Now, we're going to talk about this in more detail tomorrow. We'll watch that system again move through. But the NAM model and the GFS are trying to put some snow down in this area. Here's just an outlook of what the NAM is picking up on at this point. Remember, the NAM is pretty aggressive on snow out of this system. And I'll say this, it's never going to get the liquid to snow ratio right. I'm using a 10-to-1. You cannot use that in May. But it's just saying a changeover here to possibly some wet snowflakes is there. Now, I do want to show you what the European model is saying for this. Let's start this one off and watch it. So you can see that by Friday morning, here we are. There's that system pulling through. So again, this will be late Thursday night into Friday morning. We're going to watch this area for the severe weather. Very windy conditions on the back side of this. But notice as we get into Friday, the European, is not so keen on the snow in this area. But it does bring it into the interior parts of New England, as you can see here. And then for the northern plains, I want you to turn your attention back to the northern plains briefly. On the back side of that high, we need to watch this next low sneaking through here Saturday morning, possibly bringing in some snowflakes to North Dakota. And again, that's actually pretty late as well. So that system pulls through the central Corn Belt Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. And then behind it, we can see a change. Now, you notice that what I just showed you, systems were coming in like this, right? Now I'm going to play this from Tuesday morning on. And I want you to start to see a bit of a change in where those systems form and go. Now, we're not going to take any of this as kind of gospel truth as to where the pattern is going to be, or not the pattern, but the storm systems, but it's more about the pattern. Do you now start to see systems pulling in this direction as you watch toward the end of that run? That's the pattern change we need to be talking about here. First, I do at least want to show you what the European is picking up on snowfall amounts. So we just recently, in the last week or so, saw 80-degree weather here. And now this pattern change temporarily brings over the chance for snow in parts of Wyoming. And then again, right here, sneaking out of parts of the Canadian prairies, specifically out of parts of central Saskatchewan, might be bringing in some snow into the northern part of North Dakota as well. But do notice that the European isn't so keen on bringing in that snowfall here, but it does see it at the higher elevations in the interior parts of New England. But also do notice parts of central Wisconsin picking up some snow there, and maybe over into this part of Michigan. So what's the probability of getting 1 inch of snow? Well, this is the map. This is what it looks like. So it's not as though the chance is 0 in through here where we just talked about, but it's the Europeans not so keen on bringing in that snow. We got to watch that carefully as we progress through the end of this weekend into early next week. So certainly unwelcomed here as well. All right. Okay, total accumulated precipitation through next Wednesday morning. What we're going to see here, I think is critical to this, is how much precipitation gets put down in this area. Now, in the eastern part of that circle I just drew, there has certainly been quite a bit of wet weather lately, but the farther back west we get it is going to be critical for the soil moisture content there. But overall, just remember when you're looking at this, 0.3 of an inch is right there. That's that color transition. When you get past into those blues, we're talking about a ½ inch or more. Now, we are watching a system that is potentially going to brew here in the Bay of Campeche and move over toward Florida. This is not tropical in nature. It's going to be forming essentially on a frontal boundary and keep a cold core, but we need to watch that move across southern Florida, which could get a lot of rain out of this. Now, let me show you 2 other things I want you to pay attention to. One, with the heat that is coming in, we could get some convective activity over the 4 corner states that would look more like some monsoonal flow out of this. But the second thing is the difference between the European, which you see here, and the GFS. The GFS is much wetter in through this corridor and even down here with the system pulling through Florida than the European is at this point. So again, major model differences here, not in the placement, but in the intensity of the precipitation. Okay, from there, after May 9, 10, 11, let's get into this long-term discussion now. That trough that was over the eastern part of the United States slowly begins to move east, getting south of Greenland. That allows for ridging to return here. Okay, the heights building over the southeast return some warmer air, but just follow the contours. You can see that they're doing something like that. In that particular direction of the flow coming out of the southwest, we call it just generically southwest flow, tends to increase our chances of having more active severe weather in the central part of the United States this time of year and drier conditions over the south and east. Now, this is what we've been talking about. This is coinciding with the time when the global wind oscillation has already reached its peak and it's decreasing in value. The atmospheric angular momentum is now increasing again. Remember, it's on that 1 month kind of cycle here. So it's now increasing again, which is going to give us more zonal winds in the Pacific and a more active pattern in the midsection of the country. The MJO pulls through the null phase, but it goes across the western Pacific. The EPO bottoms out, then begins to recover, and we start to see some changes in the ENSO region with a westerly wind burst that's going to be there. Now, what does all that mean? Well, let's put it together by looking at this map. This is now week 2 European model precipitation anomalies. You now see a broader section here of wetter than average conditions, as well as in through here. So this is what happens when that southwest flow emerges. So more zonal flow here, southwestern branch comes in here, and as a result, week 2 looks wet across this area. The big unknown is how far to the west does that get, and do we get thunderstorms happening inside that area? And I know my drawings get a little bit messy here, but we need to see how far back to the west we do get these storms to hit that drought-stricken area. Does the GFS hone in on the same thing? It does. In fact, it even has a more pronounced southeastern ridge, and so this would bring the precipitation back much farther to the west. But both models do have a similar outlook for that week 2 time period. So the two things I want to consider about this, one, can the severe weather overcome what we anticipate to be a relatively stronger cap on the convection in the high plains, specifically this area? Now, the reason why we say that is because the drought that's currently in that area, the drier conditions, typically means a stronger high plains cap. And therefore, we got to really advect a lot of that moisture much farther to the west out of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, if it does that and keeps that dry line to the west, this would work on eroding some of the drought conditions we have there, which would then begin to ease our concern about later this year seeing drought that migrates from the central plains north and east, which is something we've been talking about as a concern of ours. Now, is there any support in the recovery in the midsection of the United States for severe weather? Well, I showed you this on Monday. We still continue to see that the second half of the month of May is advertising above average severe weather threat. Reminding you that this is consistent with climatology, though. I mean, mid-May through early June is when this section of the United States is normally very active. I'll show you that in a few seconds. But watch what our severe weather index is doing. In the near term, things are suppressed through the 9th, 10th, and 11th. But watch this. Getting out here into the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, do you see our index really recovering in the midsection of the country toward the 3rd and 4th week of this month with much more active conditions? Again, this is just a condition index for bringing in the potential for some better conditions for severe weather. And like I said, this is very climatologically accurate. We can see that the GFS ensemble is on with that as well as increasing the probability in this area of seeing more active severe storms. But remember, up to this point, we've been very active here, but climatologically, we transition in May and in June to the central part of the United States. Okay, so I'm just kind of building a story here. Now let's talk temperatures. Over days 6 through 10, because this encompasses the end of the weekend, we still see the cooler anomalies in place, but moderation begins by about next Wednesday, Thursday. So you've got about 7 more days if you're in this quadrant of the United States to deal with this cooler weather. But that moderation begins at that time period, like we've been discussing, and here we are looking at the 3rd week of May. And now we've got that pattern changed and the return of normal temperatures according to both European and GFS models. And that looks to continue as we get out here to the end of May. So this takes us all the way up to the 25th. With that pattern shift, we can see that this area is expected to see slightly wetter than average conditions. Now, this is different than a year ago, where the color shading was much closer to that side of the spectrum. This is just saying that the jet stream may be doing something a bit more like this. And if it is, and we get some more of that southwest flow, stronger subtropical jet will just increase not only thunderstorm activity, but also precipitation chances. We can see the temperatures recover. I do think we're biased a little bit too cool here in the Canadian prairies, and that's an important thing to be on the lookout for as they're trying to ramp up their growing season in this region as well. To finish this up, I want to talk about some longer term things here. We have been noticing that with time, basically over the last month, we have seen stronger trade winds. That's the blues here. So these are winds going in this direction across the equatorial Pacific. As of late, they're being met with some stronger westerly wind bursts, basically coming from northern Australia, that region, heading over here to the western Pacific. But notice that with that time period, the Southern Oscillation Index has increased in value, and it's now currently sitting right above zero. Now remember, negative Southern Oscillation Index is El Nino, positive is more La Nina-like. And now our question becomes, what's the longer term hold? Now this is a critical map to digest. I need to talk about these areas. We've now seen for June, July, and August, the sea surface temperature anomalies show that cold water that's currently sitting beneath the ocean surface, upwelling and hitting the surface here. This will correspond with the time of stronger trade winds. Now that is most certainly a La Nina-like signature. But I want to put a caveat onto this. Now normally when I say La Nina, the whole of the United States ears perk up when we talk about summer. But notice how warm, I'll put a W in this, how warm the North Pacific is currently being forecast. If the North Pacific stays this warm, the probability of having above average temperatures and drier than normal conditions in the central United States, well, the probability of that occurring decreases. You see, on the hottest and driest summers in the Midwest, it's not only La Nina-like conditions in the Central Pacific, but it tends to be cold all through here as well. And when you look out this far, we can't look at subseasonal oscillations like the MJO, like the global wind anomalies, like any of those things we normally look at. Our only indicators when we go out 3-6 months is going to be sea surface temperatures. And that's because of how slowly they change with ocean currents. So with the potential here of having negative Indian Ocean dipole, that is a good thing for Australia. And with the warm North Pacific and warm main development region here, well, it's kind of here, getting into the western Atlantic. These are conditions that are not right now, adding up constructively to have me tell you that I am very concerned about drought in here. I'm just not at that point. This would tell me that the west is going to be warm and the Central Plains might see some northwest flow, as would the Corn Belt. So, if we have concern over drought, it will be a change right here that we need to watch most carefully, okay? Cooler water. So this model is not perfect. It's not going to accurately get this, but that's what I want to see. So what is it showing right now for June, July, August? These are temperature anomalies. Well, the warmth will be under that big warm blob in the ocean temperatures, and that's going to keep the west warm, much above average temperatures out west, and this could mean high evaporation rates and increased fire threat. And no, I don't want to have to say that, but that's what we're looking at. If we end up getting flow that comes across, well, the Corn Belt like this, well, it tends to give us this particular pattern. Some things to watch. The latest June, July, August precipitation patterns you can see for most of the Corn Belt are wet, especially the eastern half of it. Drier conditions in the Canadian prairies, we got to watch that very carefully. We could see increased monsoonal precipitation if the heat builds a nice heat low sitting right in this area. But we'll watch that carefully, what that threat means for fires in California. And the European is thinking about some homebrew here for tropical systems, which it normally does this time of year anyway. So these are the things we're going to watch together. That's my reasoning early on in the season about what's going on. We monitor it closely together, see how it evolves, and we have a better picture as the time comes as to what we could be facing. Just remember, this long, far out in the forecast, these models are not highly accurate. So we just watch how they trend, and we see if there's any sort of a story that develops there, such that as we get closer and closer to that time period, we can paint a more accurate picture. I'll wrap it up here, and hope you all have a great week. I look forward to talking again tomorrow morning. Thank you.